They didn't want me there. They never had. But my daughter insisted, and that's the only reason I showed up. Saturday mornings in Maple Ridge are quiet in a way that almost feels forced. The kind of silence money buys, double-pane windows, gated streets, invisible lawn maintenance. I was sipping black coffee from a cracked Veterans of Foreign Wars mug when the phone rang. That alone was odd. No one really calls anymore, not at my age. I picked up, expecting spam or maybe someone from church. Mr. McBride. It's Evan. Evan Whitaker. My son-in-law. That clipped tone like he was calling in a favor he didn't want to owe. I'm calling on behalf of Lillian, he added, because God forbid he do anything out of his own volition. It's my mother's birthday dinner tonight. She'd like you to come. He paused, like the words were bitter in his mouth. No, Lillian would like you to come. There it was. I see. 6 o'clock. Essex Hill Country Club. Dress code enforced. Then the line clicked off. I stared at the receiver, then down at my mug. My reflection in the dark coffee looked tired and worn, not from age, but from being tolerated. That's what it's been like since Lillian married into that family. Tolerated. The Whitakers had never hidden their contempt. Old money, East Coast pedigree, wine lists thicker than Bibles. I was never invited to sit close at holidays, never asked for an opinion, never thanked for the decades I spent raising their golden daughter alone after her mother passed. I looked out the kitchen window at my Chevy parked by the curb, a '98 Tahoe with rust along the bumper and a temperamental starter. The neighborhood association hated it. I kept it out of spite. 6 o'clock. I had time, but not for what happened next. Around 3:15, I was heading down Route 27, gift in the passenger seat, a silver wine decanter I couldn't afford but bought anyway when I saw her. A woman, maybe in her 60s, standing beside a stalled Audi with the hood up, hazard lights blinking. Most cars just drove past. I didn't. I pulled over. Need a hand, ma'am? I asked, stepping out. She looked relieved but cautious. It just died on me. No warning. Mind if I take a look? I used to work on these back in the day. Her name was Margaret Hensley. Lived in Glenvale, not far from me. She'd been on her way to a dinner, too. I saw the shoes, expensive, probably Italian. But there was no pretense. No frost. I got to work. Grease on my hands, sweat under my collar, swearing at the tight bolts like I was back in my garage 30 years ago. 30 minutes in, I jury-rigged a solution with duct tape and wire from my toolbox. It'll get you there, I told her. Just don't turn off the engine until you're parked. She was speechless. How much do I owe you? Nothing. Then at least give me your name. Patrick. Patrick McBride. She repeated it like she wanted to remember. We both got back in our vehicles. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror, shirt untucked, grease on my cheek, sweat rings under my arms. So much for dress code. By the time I pulled up to Essex Hill Country Club, it was 6:42. I was late. I was dirty. And I was walking into enemy territory. The valet looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Inside, the maitre d' glanced me up and down like I was contagious. Name? Patrick McBride. I'm with the Whitaker party. His nostrils flared. Of course you are. They made me wait in the foyer while they fetched someone to verify. 10 minutes later, Evan appeared. His face was tight. You're late. I held up the bag with the gift. Traffic. And I stopped to help someone with car trouble. Evan didn't even fake interest. My mother is already seated. She doesn't like disruptions. He turned on his heel and walked back in, expecting me to follow. I did, and walked straight into humiliation. At the long table near the windows, seats for 20 or so, conversation halted when they saw me. Lillian looked conflicted. Relief, then worry. Her mother, Clarice Whitaker, turned slowly. She wore pearls and a tailored cream jacket that probably cost more than my truck. Her lips curled the moment she saw me. Patrick, she said. How unexpected. I was invited, I said. So you were, she replied. Though I wish someone had informed you of the club's dress code. I looked around. Not one friendly face. Just expensive smiles and polished contempt. It's fine, Evan said. He won't be staying long. I felt the weight of every eye at the table. My hands still smelled like motor oil. I set the gift on the table and said nothing. Not yet, but something shifted in the air. The host whispered something to Clarice. "There's a guest asking for Mr. McBride," he said. "A Margaret Hunsley?" Clarice frowned. "We don't know any," but I was already turning around. And when Margaret walked in, pristine, poised, still glowing from our roadside encounter, everything changed. Her voice carried across the dining hall like silk over steel. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just came to thank Patrick for what he did this afternoon." Clarice paled. Evan blinked. Lillian stood. No one knew what to say. But I did. Not yet. Margaret stood just inside the entryway, framed by the amber light of the crystal chandelier. The hush in the dining room was so thick you could have heard someone choke on a canopy. She smiled at me, not politely, not out of obligation. A real smile. A smile that said, "You matter." Clarice Whitaker blinked twice, like trying to reset her social radar. "Patrick helped me on the highway this afternoon," Margaret explained, stepping closer. "My car broke down. I was stranded, and he spent nearly an hour getting it running again. Refused to take a dime." She turned to the rest of the room, addressing them like a boardroom she'd owned for years. "I just thought it was important someone here knew the kind of man you're dining with tonight." Evan shifted uncomfortably. Clarice looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Well," Clarice finally said, tightening her grip on her wine glass, "isn't that admirable?" Her voice made it sound like I'd committed some lower-class sin. Margaret didn't flinch. "Not admirable. Rare." Palmer Whitaker, Evan's father, who had so far remained silent and smug at the head of the table, finally cleared his throat. "I take it you're an acquaintance of Patrick's?" Margaret tilted her head. "Let's just say he made quite an impression. Not many men would drop their plans to help a stranger covered in coolant and brake fluid, especially when headed somewhere important." I saw Evan's eyes narrow. Clarice forced a brittle smile. "That's very kind of you to say, Miss Hensley. But as you can see, we were just about to begin dinner." "Which meant you're not invited." Margaret's gaze drifted across the room. "I won't stay, of course. I just wanted to make sure Patrick was acknowledged properly. He sacrificed something important to help someone he didn't know." And then, the moment that cracked their illusion of control, she turned to me and said softly, "You deserve to be here, Patrick. Never let anyone in this room make you feel otherwise." The silence was so complete, you could hear ice settle in the glasses. "I'll be on my way," she added, nodding politely to the stunned crowd. "Have a pleasant evening." She left as quickly as she'd arrived. No drama, just truth, dropped like a match into a dry field. When the door clicked shut, no one moved, until Palmer broke the stillness. "So," he said, forcing a laugh. "Quite the entrance." "Yeah," I replied. "Unexpected, right?" I walked over to the table and took the empty seat next to Lillian. No one objected. They just watched. Rachel, our waitress for the evening, arrived with a tray of wine and tension thick in the air. She poured without speaking, as if afraid to break whatever spell had settled over the room. Clarice finally spoke. "Next time, Patrick, perhaps you could make your heroic efforts after you've changed clothes." I didn't look at her. "Next time someone's stranded on the side of the road, I'll make sure they fit the dress code before I offer help." Evan bristled. "You're being combative." "No," I said, finally turning to him. "I'm being present. For once." The wine glass in his hand trembled ever so slightly. "Let's just eat," he muttered. Lillian touched my arm under the table. It was subtle but firm. A sign that she saw what was happening. We ate in stiff silence. Polished silverware on bone china, but not a single word of warmth passed between them. Halfway through the salad course, Clarice asked the table, "So, Lillian, how's your new role at the hospital?" "She's doing fine," Evan answered for her. The foundation board was quite impressed with her presentation. Lillian didn't speak. She was still looking at me. Clarice kept going. "We were so relieved she chose to step away from community health. It just wasn't the right fit. I saw what they were doing, subtly dragging my daughter back into their orbit, making her one of them, taming her spirit. But not tonight. Community health is noble work," I said, "and difficult. Not everyone has the stomach for helping people who can't pay you back. Clarice lifted her eyebrows. Yes, well, that's not always sustainable, is it? I leaned back in my chair. Neither is hypocrisy. But here we are. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Evan set down his fork. This isn't the time or the place. I didn't choose the time, I said, or the place. But I'm here now. Palmer chuckled. Well, this is certainly turning into a memorable evening. Oh, don't worry, I said, my tone colder now. You'll be remembering it for a long time. And that's when Lillian spoke. Quietly, calmly. He's right, you know. Palmer's smile froze. Clarice looked confused. Evan stared at her like she'd betrayed a war pact. You've all been pretending for years, she said. But I'm tired of pretending. Clarice reached for her glass. Darling, no. Mom, let me speak. She turned to me. I invited you tonight because I'm ashamed I didn't defend you sooner. Her voice shook, but her spine didn't. You've been nothing but kind. Generous. You've helped us more than anyone knows. And we let them treat you like you were beneath us. Lillian, Evan's voice warned. No, Evan. He showed up greasy because he helped a stranger. And you showed up polished, but didn't lift a finger to help me when I was drowning in work this month. Which one of you is character? She looked back at me. Dad, I'm sorry. For all of it. I swallowed hard. A hush fell over the table again. But it was different this time. Clarice looked like she wanted to disappear. Palmer? He was already disappearing behind a wall of retreat. And Evan? He was about to say something stupid. But I'd had enough for one evening. I stood. Don't apologize, Lillian. Not anymore. I think your words speak louder than anyone else's in this room. Then I turned to the rest of them. And believe me, this story isn't over. Not yet. The plates clinked softly. And the air pulsed with something none of them expected, fear. The silence after my words didn't just sit there, it spread like smoke. I could see it in Evan's posture, the way he sat straighter, jaw tight, already spinning damage control scenarios in his mind. Palmer sipped wine like it was medicine. Clarice picked at her napkin like she wanted to fold time backward. But Lillian, she didn't shrink. She held her head high. After dinner, I didn't linger. I walked out without dessert, without coffee, without permission. The valet didn't even look me in the eye when he brought my Tahoe around. I drove through the dark backroads of Essex County with my window cracked open. The air was heavy with June's late promise, honeysuckle, and damp leaves. A storm was coming. You could feel it in your joints before it ever hit the windshield. My knuckles were white on the wheel. Not from rage, from focus. Because I wasn't just going to walk away humiliated again. Not this time. They'd drawn a line years ago, money, class, status. Everything they had, they used to keep me on the other side of it. But the thing about lines? They work both ways. I crossed mine that night. Monday morning, I showed up at 8:15 sharp to the county clerk's office. Same jacket, same quiet face, different purpose. The woman behind the counter smiled when she saw me. Morning, Mr. McBride. You hear about that land case again? I shook my head. No, ma'am. Today I'm filing. Filing what? A petition to review the ownership and zoning history on Parcel 117C, on Dunbar Lane. She blinked. That's the Whitaker development site. I nodded. Yeah, I know. You see, 25 years ago, before Palmer Whitaker was making his millions in glass and steel condos, he bought up land from struggling owners all across Maple Ridge's rural edge. He thought he'd clean the trail. He hadn't. One of those lots? Still technically in the name of Campbell and McBride Auto, LLC, a defunct business I had with an old friend who passed before we ever officially closed it down. The lot sits in the middle of Palmer's new luxury development, right where he plans to break ground on his next big trophy project. Right where he's already promised investors construction would begin in August. I still have the key to the gate. And the deed? It's buried in a dusty storage unit under my name. They say revenge is best served cold. I say it's best served legally. The next evening, I drove out to the lot just as the sun dipped behind the tree line. 20 acres of overgrown brush, old fencing, and forgotten zoning maps. Palmer probably thought the property was his by default, or figured no one would ever contest it. I stood in the middle of the clearing with the sound of frogs and cicadas pulsing through the trees, and imagined the look on his face when the building permits froze. All it takes is one valid claim of ownership and a judge with a strict calendar. And Palmer's about to meet both. Wednesday came. I waited. Then, around 10:22 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Patrick McBride? The voice was clipped. Corporate. Speaking. This is Andrew Flannery, legal counsel for Whitaker Development Group. We'd like to discuss a matter regarding Parcel 117C. I sipped my coffee. Of course. Happy to help. We're prepared to offer a settlement. That fast. They were already scrambling. Settlement for what? A clerical discrepancy. To clear title and move forward on the Essex Pines project. Sounds serious. It is. I waited 2 full seconds. Then said, I'll have my attorney call you back. I don't have an attorney. Yet, but I know someone who does. By Thursday, word had reached Clarice. She called Lillian. Lillian texted me, What are you doing? I didn't answer, because I knew the question behind it wasn't really about the land. It was, who are you becoming? The answer? Someone they finally had to reckon with. That weekend, I went to a local church bake sale, bought 2 rhubarb pies from Margaret Hensley. We sat on a bench outside under the oaks and talked for an hour like old friends who'd only just met. She didn't ask about the Whitakers. She just asked about me, and I told her stories no one had asked me about in years about how I met my late wife on a rainy day in 1973, how we raised a daughter with nothing but stubbornness and love, how I once fixed a lawnmower with a coat hanger and a can of Mountain Dew. She listened. Like every word meant something. Before she left, she squeezed my hand and said, You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I nodded. But deep down, I knew I wasn't done proving it anyway, because Palmer and Evans still had no idea what was coming. And the country club? That pristine kingdom of etiquette and exclusion? It was about to feel what it's like when an old mechanic finds leverage, not with fists, but with precision tools. And I had just started turning the wrench. You can tell a man's losing control by how often he checks his watch. Palmer Whitaker checked his 3 times in the first 5 minutes of the zoning board meeting. Friday morning. County Hall. Beige walls, humming fluorescents, 30 rows of folding chairs filled with concerned citizens and angry homeowners. And me. Front row, wearing the same navy shirt I wore the night of the party. Still clean. Still sharp. Palmer stood behind the podium in his tailored blazer, talking about revitalization and upscale opportunity corridors. Words that mean absolutely nothing unless you're about to bury a community under a parking garage. Behind him, 2 lawyers shuffled papers like stagehands prepping for a show that was already off script. Councilwoman Rita Delgado leaned into her mic. Mr. Whitaker, can you clarify the issue regarding Parcel 117C? The ownership challenge has caused some confusion. Palmer smiled, but not with his eyes. We believe it's simply an outdated filing. A technicality. I stood up. The room turned. I'm the technicality. Gasps. Murmurs. I walked slowly toward the front, folder in hand. A copy of the 1999 deed, notarized and signed. Still valid. Still mine. Palmer's face froze. Sir, his lawyer began. Councilwoman Delgado raised a hand. Let him speak. I laid the folder on the table. That land was never sold. Never transferred. It was forgotten. Buried under assumptions and arrogance. But it's not yours. Not today. Not yet. Palmer opened his mouth. But what came out wasn't defense. It was fear. Mr. McBride, we're happy to discuss terms. I turned to the board. I'm not here to sell. I'm here to stop. Silence. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Delgado nodded slowly. We'll review this filing in closed session. Until then, Parcel 117C is officially under dispute. That was it. 1 sentence. And the entire Essex Pines project, Palmer's grand, champagne-soaked vision, hit a wall at 8:46 a.m. I walked out with nothing but a manila folder and a slow smile. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. Saturday afternoon, Evan finally called. Blocked number. Nervous tone. Patrick. I didn't say anything. I just want to understand what this is. This? I said. It's what happens when people stop letting you walk over them. A pause. You're doing this for revenge? No, I replied. I'm doing it because I've watched you and your family treat decent people like dirt for a decade. It just so happens you left your blueprint on the wrong man. You're going to destroy a business. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you'll learn how to rebuild one, with integrity this time. Another pause. I didn't want things to go this far. I let that hang, then said, You're calling me now because you're scared, which means it's already gone further than you think. I hung up before he could respond. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling because he saw the headlines starting to form. And I had more than headlines planned. 2 days later, I met Margaret again, this time at a community breakfast fundraiser. She was wearing a pale blue scarf and passing out donation flyers like someone who believed the world could still be kind. She noticed the fatigue in my face before I could fake a smile. This business with your daughter's in-laws, she said gently, it's turning into a real storm. Some storms, I said, are overdue. She nodded, but her eyes were full of something else. Worry. You're not just trying to prove a point anymore, are you? I didn't answer, because she was right. This wasn't just about a birthday party or a dirty shirt. This was about who they were and how many people they'd crushed under the weight of that perfect brick facade. The difference was, I wasn't afraid of what happened when the cracks started showing. They were. Monday's paper ran a headline on page 3. Zoning halt threatens Essex Pines development. Ownership dispute may delay construction for months below it. A subheadline, local retiree files claim on key parcel I clipped it and folded it into my wallet. Not for bragging rights. For documentation. Because the legal side was just the beginning. The next front? Reputation. You see, Palmer had built his kingdom on 2 things, money and image. And thanks to a contact from my garage days, a man named Jake who now ran a regional podcast called Built from the Bottom, that image was about to get more complicated. Jake called me the next day. You sure about this, Patrick? Very. Because once this goes live, they're not going to be able to pretend you don't exist anymore. That's the point. He paused, then said, let's tell the story right. That Friday, the episode dropped, Grease, Grit, and the Goliaths, how one man stopped $1 million machine. Jake interviewed me in my garage. No fancy edits. No dramatic music. Just truth. How Palmer Whitaker built an empire on vanity and leverage. How people like me were always the ones stepping aside until now. The episode went viral. Not Hollywood viral, but local viral, 37,000 listens in 48 hours. Suddenly, the country club couldn't host events without someone whispering, that's the guy, right? The one who tried to push out his daughter's dad. Clarice canceled her brunch. Palmer postponed a speaking engagement. And Evan? He didn't show up to work Monday morning. But I wasn't finished. Because if they thought a podcast episode was uncomfortable, the next move would really test their ability to sit still. Because it wasn't about land anymore. It was about legacy. And I was just getting started rewriting theirs. You can't burn down a house with wet matches. So I waited. 3 days after the podcast went live, I started getting emails. Most were anonymous. A former contractor from one of Palmer's early builds. A laid-off accountant. Even a waitress from the country club who'd seen too much and heard more. They all said the same thing in different ways. There's more you don't know. They've been hiding things for years. You're not the only one they've tried to step on. I created a new email account just for this. truthfordublin@protonmail.com, and the floodgates opened. Palmer's empire was a shell game. Overbilled projects. Underpaid subcontractors. Lobbyist dinners written off as community grants. A nonprofit urban renewal fund that funneled money right back into his own projects. Sloppy? Yes, but more importantly, provable. I compiled everything. Screenshots, whistleblower statements, old PDF invoices from a 2016 roofing contract that was never completed. By Thursday, I had 48 pages of material. I slid them into a red file folder. Labeled it by hand. Whitaker Shadows and Shells. That night, I called Councilwoman Delgado. We'd spoken briefly after the zoning board session. Now I asked to meet in person. We met at a diner off Route 33. No cameras. No press. Just two people in a corner booth with burnt coffee and nothing to lose. She listened for 40 minutes straight. Didn't take a single bite of her sandwich. When I finished laying out what I had, she said 2 words, "Holy hell." I sipped my coffee. That about sums it up. She leaned back. This goes beyond zoning. I know. You're saying Whitaker Construction has been embezzling public funds? At best? Misallocating. At worst? Yes. She closed the folder. I'll have the state auditor look at this. Good. But once this goes up the chain, Patrick, it doesn't stop. You ready for that? I nodded. Because this wasn't just about dignity anymore. It was about decency. And whether people like Palmer got to keep rewriting the rules while the rest of us swept the floorboards. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not Evan. Not Palmer. Not Clarice. It was Lillian. I let it go to voicemail. She left one. Dad, I don't know what's happening, but Evan's furious. He's saying the company's being audited. Palmer hasn't come out of his office in 2 days. People are panicking. What did you do? What did I do? I opened the blinds. Saturday night. 11:43 p.m. Margaret Hensley knocked on my door holding a pie dish and a newspaper. She didn't say hello, just handed me the Dublin Register. Front page. State to audit Whitaker Development after zoning dispute triggers whistleblower review. I read it twice. Then set it down. Margaret looked at me. You're not gloating. That's good. No, you're not smiling either. Because I know this won't fix everything. But it might stop them from hurting the next person. She nodded. You could have just sued them, you know. Gotten a big payout. I don't want money. What do you want? I looked at her and said, a world where men like Palmer Whitaker can't buy silence anymore. 2 days later, a real estate reporter from the Columbus Ledger reached out. She'd heard about the zoning case and wanted a quote. I said no, but when she asked why I was doing this, I gave her the truth. My daughter married into a family that thinks being rich means being right. And I'm just a man who spent 40 years fixing broken things. She printed that, word for word. It went viral. Even the locals who didn't care about zoning or audits started paying attention. Because everyone knows what it feels like to be looked down on. Friday morning, Clarice showed up at my door. She didn't call first. Didn't smile when I opened it. She was holding a small white envelope and wearing a face that had never had to apologize before. Lillian's struggling, she said. She's caught between her father and her husband and this. Crusade. Crusade? You're tearing down everything we've built. I raised an eyebrow. No, I'm just taking off the paint. You built it on termites. She glared at me. You think this makes you noble? I don't care what it makes me. She held out the envelope. From Palmer. I opened it. Inside, a check for $100,000. Made out to me. No memo. No note. You think I can be bought? Clarice blinked. I think Palmer hopes you can be. I folded the check once, then again. Then I tore it clean down the center. And again. And again. The pieces drifted to the porch floor like confetti at a funeral. Tell your husband I don't take bribes. I give warnings. Clarice opened her mouth, then thought better of it. She turned and walked away. No parting shot. No sarcasm. Just footsteps. Just fear. That night, I sat in my garage. The old radio played soft blues while I wiped down the tools I'd used to help Lauren that day on the highway. Every socket wrench. Every screwdriver. Because all of this, started with doing the right thing for someone who needed it. And somehow, that had become my entire mission. You fix broken belts. You fix broken systems. You fix broken people, too, even if it means tearing down everything around them to let the light in. The Whitakers had built their kingdom with lies, influence, and perfectly polished smiles. But I had something else. Time. Truth. And nothing left to lose. And that combination? That's what brings empires down. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Gold-trimmed envelope. Heavy cardstock. Calligraphy font that probably had its own trademark. A celebration of growth and legacy. The Essex Pines groundbreaking ceremony. Hosted by Whitaker Development Group. Scheduled for Saturday. I stared at it like it was a joke. Because they still thought they could break ground. After the audit announcement. After the zoning board delay. After the podcast, the articles, the broken check on my porch. They still thought reputation could buy reality. Or maybe this was Palmer's way of proving he wasn't scared. But fear isn't loud. Fear throws parties. I didn't RSVP, but I plan to attend. Just not through the front entrance. Friday night, my phone rang. Caller ID, Lillian. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hi, Dad. Her voice was soft. Unsure. Not the polished cadence I'd come to associate with the Whitaker brand. Lillian. She paused. Then, I don't know where to begin. Start with the truth. Silence. I knew about some of it, she whispered. The money games. The fake charities. Evan always told me it was just how business worked. That everyone did it. And you believed him. I wanted to. Another pause. Mom knew too, she said. She just didn't care. She said people like us didn't get caught. Us. I almost hung up, but I waited. I never wanted you to be humiliated that night, she said. I was horrified. I wanted to scream, but I froze. That's not the night I'm angry about, Lillian. She didn't respond. I'm angry about every time you saw them dismiss me, mock me, treat me like a janitor at your wedding, and you said nothing. I didn't know how to fight them. You didn't need to fight them. You just needed to stand up. She breathed in sharply. I'm trying now. Good, I said. Because when this next hammer drops, there won't be a middle ground left. She sniffled. Will you be at the event? I'll be close. Click. Saturday morning was clear. Blue skies. Cool breeze. The kind of perfect weather that felt like it should belong to weddings or county fairs, not public reckonings. Essex Pines sat quiet at 9:45 a.m., but valet stands were being set up, folding chairs arranged in rows, a white tent erected beside the dirt lot. A stage stood facing the empty field. Behind it, 3 enormous banners. Building Tomorrow. Whitaker Legacy. Community First. I almost laughed. Community first, after kicking that community out. I parked a block away and walked in through the back path near the tree line. Didn't want a spotlight, just a view of the fire. Guests began arriving at 10:30. Local council members, real estate investors, people in pastel linen suits who'd never held a hammer in their lives. Palmer took the stage at exactly 11 o'clock. He looked thinner, tired. Even his perfect gray hair seemed forced now, like an actor still clinging to a role he no longer believed in. Thank you for joining us, he began, on this historic day. Behind him, Evan smiled like a mannequin. Clarice wore sunglasses, though the shade covered her completely. And Lillian? She sat 2 rows back, alone, hands folded tightly in her lap. My daughter, trying to blend into a disaster zone. Palmer kept talking. Phrases like economic stimulus and urban renewal floated over the field like helium balloons. Then came the shovel ceremony. 5 golden shovels. 5 fake scoops of earth. The photo op team moved in. That's when it happened. Across the street, 2 unmarked state vehicles pulled up. 3 men in suits. 2 women with clipboards. They approached the event with quiet purpose, like people who'd been waiting months for a show to end. The whispers started in the second row. By the time Palmer noticed them, it was too late. One of the officials stepped directly onto the stage and spoke to him off mic. Palmer's face dropped like a shutter falling closed. He turned back to the crowd, pale. I will be postponing today's remarks. The crowd murmured. Reporters leaned in. Then one woman from the Columbus Ledger shouted, Mr. Whitaker, is it true the state has frozen your development accounts? No response. Just retreat. The family backed off the stage like a storm surge was coming. They scattered toward the tent. I stepped forward, still in the crowd, still silent, and caught Lillian's eye. She saw me. I didn't smile. She stood up and started walking toward me, heels crunching over gravel and loose dirt. Dad, she said, breathless. They're saying the funding's frozen, that all their contracts are being reviewed. I nodded once. And you're happy? No, I said. I'm satisfied. There's a difference. She looked down. I can't go back to them after this. Then don't. I don't know where to go. Start somewhere honest. She looked back at the stage. Her husband now arguing with one of the auditors. Clarice holding her forehead like she'd just lost a kingdom. Then she looked at me. Can I come with you? My heart did something I hadn't felt in years. It clenched. I've got an extra cup of coffee at home, I said, and an old couch that doesn't ask questions. She cried then, not loudly, just quietly, like a faucet that finally stopped resisting the pressure. We walked away from the mess together. The signs behind us read community first, but the only community that mattered now was the one between a father and his daughter, finally rebuilt from truth. Monday came with rain. Thin, annoying drizzle. The kind that doesn't soak you, just seeps into your collar and ruins your mood. Lillian sat at my kitchen table, staring into a mug of lukewarm coffee. She hadn't said much since Saturday. Just kept helping washing dishes, sweeping the porch, folding laundry I'd already folded. Guilt is a quiet roommate. And I didn't press her. I'd waited too long for her to come back. I wasn't going to smother her now. But the knock at the door that morning, that pressed everything. I opened it and found a courier in a gray parka holding a thick envelope. Mr. Patrick Hanley? That's me. He handed it over and walked off without another word. Inside, I slit the top open with my pocket knife and pulled out the contents. Thick legal paper. Top line read, Notice of Defamation Claim, Whitaker Development Group versus P. Hanley underneath, Allegations of Slander. Damage to reputation. Intentional interference with business relationships. Lillian read over my shoulder. Her hand covered her mouth. Oh God, they're suing you. Of course they are. Palmer's last move. Desperation dressed in litigation. I read through the document twice. They wanted $2.5 million in damages. $2.5 million. For telling the truth. I folded it once and set it on the table. Lillian looked at me, eyes wide. Are you going to fight it? I sipped my coffee. I'm going to answer it. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer named Carlton Briggs. Mid-60s. Smelled like paper and cigars. Office wallpaper peeling at the edges. Law degrees crooked in dusty frames. In other words, my kind of man. I handed him the envelope. He flipped through the pages, nodding slightly. This is a bluff. I figured. They don't expect to win, he said. They just want to bleed you dry with court fees and paperwork until you beg for mercy. I leaned forward. What's the best way to respond? Briggs grinned like a wolf who just found a stray calf. We don't respond, Patrick. We counterattack. How? He tossed the Whitaker lawsuit aside like junk mail. We file a motion to dismiss. Then we file a counterclaim. Malicious prosecution. Abuse of process. And while we're at it, we request discovery. Meaning we legally force them to hand over everything related to their finances, communications, and business records. I stared at him. He shrugged. You want to hit a man with a brick? First, you make him open his own toolbox. I smiled for the first time all day. Do it. By Friday, word had leaked. The Columbus Ledger ran another article. Whitaker sues local resident over podcast fallout, but might face bigger trouble. Public opinion turned fast. Even those who'd kept quiet during the zoning scandal saw this for what it was, a billionaire bully slapping around the town mechanic. Whitaker stock dropped 7% in a day. Clarice's charity events started getting canceled. One by one, their sponsors pulled out. Too much heat. Too much bad press. Palmer thought he was putting out fires. But the whole forest had already gone up in smoke. On Sunday morning, as I was cleaning out the gutters, a car pulled into the driveway. Black Lincoln, tinted windows. Not Evan. Not Clarice. Palmer. I watched him step out, his silver hair plastered by sweat, despite the cool morning. He walked up the path like a man who didn't believe in doors slamming in his face. He looked up at me on the ladder. Can we talk? I came down slowly, wiped my hands on a rag, and nodded toward the porch. We sat in silence for a minute. Palmer cleared his throat. I'll drop the lawsuit. Of course you will. He nodded. Under one condition. I didn't respond. You stop talking. No more podcasts. No more interviews. No more digging into old records. I waited. He reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. Set it on the porch railing. $250, 000. Settlement offer. No NDA. Just silence. I stared at the envelope. Then I looked at him. Do you think this is who I've become? I think this is your chance to walk away with dignity. I almost laughed. My dignity's the reason we're here, Palmer. He looked tired. Not the fake political exhaustion, the real kind. The kind that comes when your world starts shrinking around you and you're too proud to admit it. I used to think you were harmless, he said. I used to think you were untouchable. He stood up. If you go through with this, with discovery, depositions, you could bury me. That's the idea. He swallowed hard. You'd ruin your daughter's future. She's already chosen it. And it's not with you. Palmer stepped down from the porch, slower now. Deflated. I built this empire from nothing, he muttered. No, I said. You built it from everyone else's everything. Their labor. Their silence. Their pain. He stopped. I'm offering you peace. You're offering me a receipt. He turned. Didn't say another word. The Lincoln rolled away, quiet and clean. That night, I lit a fire in the backyard pit. Lillian joined me, bringing 2 cups of cocoa. We sat together, the silence warm. You turned him down, she said. I did. What now? I watched the flames curl around old pine branches. Now we let the truth do what it does best, which is burn through lies. The Whitakers blinked first. Briggs called me Tuesday morning. They folded. Completely? Lawsuit withdrawn. No counters. No settlements. No gag orders. I exhaled, slow, steady, quiet. They realized what was coming. Briggs chuckled. Once we filed for discovery, they understood the math. Fight you and risk public depositions, or walk away and pray the story dies. It won't. No, he said, but they will. Palmer's empire didn't crumble overnight. It rotted slowly, like an old estate where the roof starts leaking and the foundation begins to shift. First, the zoning board made the Essex Pines reversal permanent. Then a second whistleblower came forward, someone from inside Whitaker Holdings. By summer, the SEC was sniffing around. By fall, they were raiding the downtown office. Clarice moved out of state, to Arizona, some said. Evan tried launching a consulting firm. It folded in 4 months. Their names still carried weight, just not the kind anyone wanted. The podcast series ended at episode 12, The Dirt Beneath Essex Pines. Final episode title, The Man They Tried to Silence. We closed on a simple clip, me, sitting in my garage, saying, I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. But I'll take both if that's what it takes to be heard. We hit 1 million plays in a week. I didn't go viral. I went real. People showed up. Mechanics, veterans, teachers, nurses, all the ones who'd been looked down on because their collars weren't white. They wrote in, called, sent letters, said, you spoke for me. I hadn't planned on that, but I welcomed it. Lillian stayed. She took a job at the county outreach office, entry level, low pay, high purpose. She told me the first day nearly broke her. Someone asked her what she used to do, but she stuck with it. She started laughing again. Not performative social laughter, real laughter. She repainted the spare bedroom, planted tomatoes, started showing up to town council meetings with a notebook. She'd been raised on luxury, but dignity fit her better. Late one October evening, I stood in the yard, raking up leaves while the last light died over the roof. Lillian came out holding a letter. Registered mail, she said, from the Whitaker estate attorney. I opened it. Palmer had passed. Stroke, the letter said. Sudden. The funeral would be private. Lillian watched me read it. You okay? I nodded. I didn't hate him, I said. You had every right to. Hating a man like Palmer is like hating a storm. He didn't care what you thought. He just blew through. I folded the letter, tucked it into my back pocket. He's gone, Dad. I looked around the yard. The same patch of land where I'd fixed 1,000 engines, sharpened mower blades, painted mailboxes. Not grand, but mine. I was never fighting him, Lillian. Then who? The part of the world that lets men like him rise without ever asking who gets crushed underneath. She didn't say anything, just stepped closer, hugged me. We stood in the yard under an orange sky, surrounded by raked leaves and old trees. A quiet kind of peace. Earned, not inherited. The next day, I visited the site. Essex Pines. Still undeveloped. Still scarred. But something had changed. A new sign had been put up by the town council. Simple metal. Fresh paint. Future home of Essex Community Center. Built by the people. For the people. And underneath that, in smaller letters, land donated anonymously by a resident who believed dignity can't be bought. I stood there a long time. The breeze smelled like dirt and dry grass. A good smell. A clean smell. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of the silence. Not everything needs a headline. Some things speak louder without one. Sometimes the loudest revenge is to keep standing when they expected you to disappear.